Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, thank you so very much for being a listener to the Public Relations Review podcast. I would really appreciate you leaving a review of the podcast. Let me know what you think. To make it easy, you can go directly to the podcast website, and that is publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can go directly to the review page to leave your review. So let me know what you think of the podcast. And again, thank you so very, very much for being a listener.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review podcast, a worldwide award-winning podcast. Our experienced guests cover a wealth of current, useful topics, including adapting to technological advancements, digital and AI matters, misinformation, media relations, fake news, crisis communications, and much, much more. And of course, your feedback is always welcome. Now, here is your host and producer, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to our listeners all across America and around the world. Now, Apple has ranked this podcast among the top 1% of podcasts worldwide. And Listen Score ranks the podcast as one of the top 10% most popularly monitored shows out of the 3.5 plus million podcasts globally. So thank you to all of our guests and listeners for your continued support. And if you enjoy the show, please leave a review. Now, question. I believe we all agree that most companies and organizations want actual customers to advocate for them and validate their products and services. Well, many have adopted this process. Well, what about the health sector? With numerous regulations and other legal barriers, how can these organizations overcome frustrating potential barriers to attract advocates? Well, my guest today has faced these hurdles. She operates the boutique health technology and wellness public relations and communications agency. They sit at the intersection of health, culture, and the community, and they use their deep roots in all things health to grow healthy brands. So joining me today from Chicago, Illinois, is Robin Malone. She is the CEO of RJ Communications. Robin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you is because I'd never seen this issue had never come up before. So you never know who's listening, and I thought that since you've been in the trenches, start with first you providing an overview of the health and wellness climate that you work in.
For sure. So I've been doing this work, so specifically public relations and communications in the healthcare space, for almost 30 years. And I started my agency about 5 years ago. And I don't have to tell you how difficult it is for healthcare companies and brands to find and to activate the advocates on their behalf. And that is and has been and continues to be an uphill battle in terms of the people who are using XYZ treatment or ABC facility wanting to say, this has really helped me, this has really impacted my life. It is a constant battle specific to healthcare in the U.S.
Now, when you say that specific battle, are there actual legal hurdles that prevent somebody saying, hey, look, I really like the job the doctor so-and-so did for me, they're wonderful?
Yes and no. So if a patient wants to share about their experience, right? So if I went to Dr. Jones and I had a wonderful experience, and I think Dr. Jones is amazing, I have full control over what I want to say about my own health and my own healthcare. It gets trickier when Dr. Jones says it on your behalf. That he can't do. He certainly can't do without your permission. Mm-hmm. And how much detail he can share is very limited because we have HIPAA laws. And HIPAA is designed to protect patients' personal health information. So there are really important legal restrictions and regulatory guidelines that are specifically designed to protect my personal and your personal health information. But if I'm on board then I can say what I want. And if the doctor reaches out to me and says, can you speak on my behalf? At that point, I can say what I want. That's on me. But the doctor or the company or, the marketer can't.
I see.
That's a different thing. And and the reason that you'll hear them talking about patients, but they'll be anonymous or they'll be very vague, or they'll talk about patients in the aggregate, is because there are very clear restrictions in terms of what you can and can't say about a patient's health.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some of the, maybe a little bit more specific, some of the more difficult projects that you worked on, that something like that was facing you, and how you satisfied getting that done.
Yeah, it's interesting because as a marketer and a PR person, I am hired, I am, collaborating with, I am working on behalf of a company or a brand or a service, right? But in a lot of ways, I sit between them as the bridge between the patient who uses the product or, uses the service or gets treatment at this facility or this hospital, and that facility, service, product, or company. I kind of sit at the center. And so building this bridge is a tricky one to build, and it can't be transactional, and it can't be a one and done. You have to build the kind of trust that takes time to build. In order for someone, irrespective, quite frankly, if I had a wonderful experience with you or this product or not, I may not want to talk about this. I may not want to share my story because it's mine, right? And it's completely my story. And so some of the things that we've done in the past and currently, again, is to, one, there's just basic expectation management in terms of, XYZ hospital, to say they may not want to talk about that. And they may not want to be, never mind sharing their own personal experience, they may not want to be on record being associated with this treatment, because this disease or this illness may have a stigma that they don't want on them. And so there's an art and a science to, one, finding the ones who are open or who want to be more open, and I call those the loud voices in the room. And two, working with them to ensure that they feel safe and protected in the sharing of that story. And that they don't feel used, and that they don't feel like a transaction. And so oftentimes we let them write the story, in air quotes, right? We let them write it, and then they'll share it with us, and we will work with them to maybe refine it just so that maybe it's a little bit crisper, it's a little bit more compelling, we get to the point faster. But it's not our job to write anyone else's story.
So what I'm what I'm really hearing you say here, then, it really depends upon the particular service or activity that took place with the patient and the hospital, that they might feel that it's too private to talk about. So they're not going to touch that one. But if it's something that, happens to somebody every day, I slipped and, broken foot or broken leg or something, but they did a great job, that one might not be that difficult to encourage them to speak up on behalf of the hospital or the doctor.
So what I'll say is, I think there's some obvious differences between a person who's getting treated for diabetes or obesity and versus someone who broke an ankle, right? Like, there's something that's deeply personal about having a chronic disease like obesity or diabetes, and someone who is just like the rest of us, slipped on somebody, some broke their ankle. So there's some clear differences there. But I wasn't really saying that it was condition specific. What I was saying was that it's very personal to that person. Irrespective of what the condition is. Now, if the condition is, considered very personal or chronic or whatever, then yes, that's a harder hurdle to clear. But even those who just sprained an ankle, they may not want to talk about that.
Right.
So it isn't about what happened to them. It's about that person.
Right.
It's about what is important to them, what's personal to them, how much they want to talk about what it is that they experienced or didn't experience. And so, again, much less about what is happening or what has happened, and much more about the person, which is where the trust and the relationship and the conversation comes in.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you broach this idea before the activity takes place, or do you wait until it happens after it takes place to decide whether you want to ask them to be an advocate for the services they just got?
Yeah, just mainly before, because in our work, and it's not just services, right? It's often like they had a great experience being treated with this drug or, that device.
Mm-hmm.
In an ideal world, when you are responsible for telling the story of a brand, product, company, or service, you want personal experiences to help lead the way. And that means I want people who have lived experiences in this facility or with this drug or whatever. And so that's always what the aim is. It is always what we hope to get, because the person, my neighbor who had a great experience with this drug, is far more impactful than the head of the company talking about this drug.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have any examples of some successful opportunities that you've had without identifying either the person or the organization, what it was that they had done, and because they're willing to do it, it really shined a light on the organization? Do you have any stories that you can tell about that and how you got patients to come on board?
Sure. I did it. I've done this for so long, but a recent example is a large global pharmaceutical company that we work with. This wasn't drug or therapy or therapeutic area specific, but it was about the company, which in a lot of ways is even harder to get someone to advocate for, right? Because they're like, especially in the industries like pharma that are so maligned, right? Where the trust levels are very, very low. So we did a campaign where we wanted people to use their social media and the company's social media to talk about healthcare on behalf of the company. And I think ultimately we were successful because it wasn't generic. It was like, this is about your life and not your health, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to craft a campaign where they were talking about their lives, but they were doing it on behalf of the company. And that was where the success landed for us, if that makes sense. It was because this was not personal to them or not about their health. This was about their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really was a very successful campaign.
So it really becomes then how you go about structuring what the campaign will be about, as you said, about their life, not so much about the hospital or the services they provided, but how it added to the quality of their life as a result of having the service.
That's right. So you kind of shift it and reframe it so that it's not about the drug and it's not about whatever, illness they may be living with. Mm-hmm. It's about them as people.
Mm-hmm. So that really takes some careful planning.
And that was the success. I'm sorry?
I was about to say, that takes some careful planning to make sure that, you can maybe convince the person or talk to the person and let them know, here's what we'd like you to do is that, how is this, once this is done, how will this impact the quality of your life? And if they buy into that, they really don't have to talk about specifically, that I like the surgery or I like the doc that perform the services.
Yeah, it is. It's a very it can be a tricky needle to thread. It can be, but there is a tone and posture of care and understanding and relationship that over the years I've learned, and now my team knows, to approach it with. This is not about a business transaction. This is not a clinical transaction. This is not a healthcare transaction. We just want you to talk about your life,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd love to partner with you to do that if you're comfortable.
Mm-hmm. When you say that you like to get them to talk about, how long does it take perhaps to convince someone from hearing this the first time to when they actually say, yeah, that's not a bad idea?
So to be honest, I don't convince. Because when someone sets a boundary and they say that they're not comfortable, two things go through my mind. The first of which is they've already said no.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part is if I manage to kind of get them over the line and convince them, there's nothing that's they're probably not going to be comfortable. And those people aren't good advocates.
Right.
Because they don't really want to do it. They're doing it because I've made a good case to do it. But this goes back to this idea of the loudest voice in the room. I want those who are already saying, oh my God, this was so great.
Right.
My life is better because I took, my doctor prescribed this drug.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first stop on this advocate train, if you will. These are the first people I want to go to. If I have to convince you, then you are not going to be a good advocate because you're not one.
Mm-hmm. Well, the bottom line here is that they had a good experience. And because they liked the experience so well, they're completely willing on their own to actually say that it's been a good experience. So the difficulty is not there. It's just a matter of you asking them if they're willing to share it with others.
Yeah, and I think, and the issue is not whether they've had a good experience, right? Obviously, if they didn't have a good experience, then they're not the right people for us to approach as advocates. So they're not people we approach anyway. But within the hundreds or thousands of people that have had good experiences, there's going to be a tiny fraction of them that actually want to talk,
mm-hmm.
or that that want to talk about their lives, that want to be associated with this hospital or this pharma company, irrespective of how great of an experience they may have had. And so it's not about the experience. The experience is, it is assumed that if we are approaching someone to be an advocate, they've had a good experience. So that's thematic.
Right.
It's whether they want to talk. And that's highly personal.
Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of your being in. Now, how do you get in touch with these particular people? I mean, does the organization contact you and say, well, we'd like to find some patient we've had that's willing to talk about it, because they've had a good experience? How do you get in touch with these particular, I'm going to call them patients, to help ask them if they're willing to move forward? Yeah,
so it can be pretty complicated because of HIPAA laws, but oftentimes at my agency, we're the ones that are saying it would be great if we had some patients or some people with experience to talk about them, or to talk about their experience, or to talk about whatever. And so we are the ones who are first advocating for this.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is, depending on what we're talking about, whether it's a drug, whether it's a doctor, it's rarely a doctor, but it's whether it's a drug or, a hospital or a system or maybe a device or technology, there is a pretty intense process we have to work with compliance and legal to get permission to even reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to opt in to be reached out to, and then we reach out to them, and then then there's a second step where they say, okay, you can talk to me about this. So it's pretty intense. And oftentimes what we've gone in and done is to say, you should ask them before they embark on the service or the treatment or whatever, so that we have the list of people who we know might be willing to talk. Because if not, then there are 2 or 3 extra steps, because the patient has to allow you, the patient has to allow the pharma company, the hospital, the doctor to share their information.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to say yes. And that yes is without me. So the pharma company has information. They have to reach out to them and say, hey, this is what we'd like to do. Would you be open to talking to whomever? And they have to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, they have to give permission to share their healthcare information, because I don't know anything. I don't know who it is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because legally they can't share anything with me until the patient gives permission.
Right. Okay. So it really doesn't start with you. It has to start with somebody asking this particular person, and then once they see that it's a go, then they can bring you in to work out the details of how to go about it, so to speak.
Right. The process doesn't start with me. The strategy starts with me.
Okay. So good. Now, how long have you been doing this?
Almost 30 years.
Oh, my goodness. Now, I'm sure you've got stories that are both wonderful to hear about, and some of those I said, oh, my goodness, I'm sorry I got involved.
Yeah. No, for sure. All of those stories exist. But all of them are really interesting learnings. And even the bad things where you feel like you have scars the learning is what to avoid and what to see before it happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things that I've learned, and it's especially important with my agency, we're a small agency, I can tell by the process and the interaction with the potential client, not someone who's already a client, how they will be as a client. I've just been doing this too long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that information is so wonderfully telling. And then I can make the decision about whether I'm going to continue to pursue or not.
Right. Okay. Well, let me say this, Robin. We're coming to a close on this thing, and I really enjoyed hearing about this process. I didn't know it was so difficult to get people to talk about things that went well for them. But I think you've explained it. I certainly enjoyed it, and I hope that my listeners have enjoyed it. Any closing remarks from you?
No, this is great. I really enjoyed this, and it's taken me down like a memory lane that I feel like I need to remind myself of in terms of building a trust and getting out of the transactional mode that sometimes the work forces you into. So this is a good reminder for me. So I really appreciate this conversation.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly glad you had a chance to come on and share this information with our listeners. My guest today has been Robin Malone. She's the CEO of RJ Communications. And I certainly want to thank her, and I want to thank my listeners again for joining us. And if you've enjoyed the show, we'd like to get a review from you. And don't forget to share this information with your friends about the Public Relations Review podcast.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, let me say thank you so much for being a listener. Now, I want to alert you to our shiny new podcast website located at podpage.com. However, you can go directly to the podcast site located at publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can contact me through email. You can leave a voice message. You can leave a review. You can read an episode blog and frequently learn about the podcast guests. You might also want to suggest podcast topic ideas or even suggest a guest. You can also let me know if you would like to receive our podcast listener logo that you can post on your social media. So I look forward to hearing from you about our new podcast website. Thank you so much for listening to the Public Relations Review podcast, and have a great day.